Hi. Do you suffer from anxiety with regard to your stepchildren? Subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell, and I'll let you know every time I post. It is really difficult to cope with the ups and downs of stepchildren coming to stay. And having anxiety is just a very normal reaction to this situation you're in. But what can you do about it? Well, the first point in this is to really recognise that this is not about nothing, that you really have every reason to feel increased anxiety when you've got your stepchildren coming to stay. So don't feel bad about the anxiety you feel. You're doing really well to cope with it. Everybody is. So, with that in mind, you then need to do a bit of an analysis on yourself. First of all, buy yourself a little journal, and in your journal, make a note of the things that happen that cause you anxiety when they come to stay. Now, you can write the journal in any way you want, but the kinds of points that might be helpful to make a note of is the date and the time it happens, what the actual event is, what you're doing when anxiety begins to grow, what you're doing before you're beginning to feel anxious. Now, it's quite likely that you begin to feel anxious before anybody arrives. But in your journal, you need to be making a note of every time you get that twang, that anxiety twang, that whatever symptom it is that you're getting from your anxiety, the moment you begin to feel it, even if it's triggered by a thought in your head, you need to write it down in your journal. Also, make a note of who is around at the time and what form your anxiety takes. What are your anxious feelings? And what is your coping mechanism? What is it that you do? Do you shrink away and disappear? Do you say something you regret? Do you use kind of displaced anger? Do you get angry with your partner when really you're just suffering an anxious reaction to something? Write down what your coping mechanisms are when you start feeling this increased level of anxiety. Now, when you've got about, 20 entries in your journal, that's when you're going to begin to see patterns in what is happening. And then, when you begin to realize what these patterns are, you will be able to address them much better than when you were before. I tell you, this being able to sort out what the patterns are is transformational. You can really see what's causing it, how you're coping with it, what you're doing, and how to solve it much better when you know what the pattern is for what's causing you the anxiety. And you'll be greatly relieved by this too, because not everything will be causing you anxiety. There'll just be some things that will trigger you much more than others. And that is really worth knowing. In fact, once you start keeping a journal as a step-parent, I would suggest you continue, because it can tell you so much and help you solve so many things in your step-family. And then, when you're looking at the journal and you're bringing the common threads together and seeing where the patterns are and seeing what the triggers are and seeing what your coping mechanisms are, then you are in a much better position to make adjustments. Maybe you change your coping mechanism. Do something else. Maybe you plan not to be triggered by not being around at a particular time or in a particular place or when something particular is happening. And maybe you can work to offset the anxiety before it really takes a hold by distracting yourself or doing something else. One of the main things with anxiety is to work your way through it instead of giving in to it. So keep doing what you can to overcome it. So try experiments. So you know something may trigger you and you may get increased anxiety. Go through it and come out the other side. Treat them as experiments and say, I'm going to really try this weekend to have a different outcome from this feeling of anxiety I get when such and such happens. It's only by keeping on trying and analysing and working through the anxiety that you will begin to find that things get a little bit easier. Try the easy things first and leave the more difficult, anxious feelings you have for later. But I just want to say to you that I don't think there are many step-parents who don't suffer anxiety from the experience of having stepchildren around. So you're not alone, and what you are doing is really good. Whatever you're coping with is really good. And what you need to do is to analyse the bits that you're finding too hard to cope with at the moment and look at what you can do differently about those things. We run workshops, sessions, an email response service, and we write booklets. Look at the description box below for links to our social media and website.